Hello again. Welcome to the Bridging the Dementia Divide wind-up session for Unit 5. The focus this week has been on integrative care as a solution to fragmented care. And the aim of this particular module was to explore the concepts of integrated care. The context, of course, is that the medical focus generally tends to be on cure, but this is not relevant in the case of dementia, because sadly there isn't cure at the moment. So the focus needs to be on holistic care, that is the all-round care of the patient and their family. Nick Goodwin, in his presentation, talked about when care is being fragmented, the most vulnerable people suffer. And I think nowhere is this more true than with people with dementia, who really are very, very dependent on others looking after them. So it might be helpful, I think, if we can consider why fragmentation occurs. We've looked at various notions of integration, but why does fragmentation of care occur in the first place? Well, I've looked at this in preparation for another module I wrote, actually, a module on interprofessional working. And it's quite clear that the history of our respective professions is, well, it throws up some interesting perspectives. For a start, we've had medical schools, schools of nursing, schools of physiotherapy, schools of occupational therapy, and so on and so forth. Now, just imagine all of these separate schools working in isolation. They're doing a very good job in preparing the relevant practitioners for their roles. So they prepare doctors adequately, they prepare nurses, physiotherapists adequately. But just imagine that the schools are isolated buildings. They have nothing to do with the other schools. Effectively, there are no windows, so they can't see out. They can't see what goes on in a nursing school or a physiotherapy school or a medical school. They are focused entirely on their own subject. So when the practitioners qualify in whatever sphere of health or social care they're working, when they qualify, they go out and they work in what we call a multidisciplinary team. But they have very little knowledge of what other team members can do. So I think we have to question the notion of what is a team. So is a team a collection of individuals, or is it a collection of individuals who know each other's roles and can work very well together? Maybe you could make the analogy of a football team, sort of very, very good football teams. The players know what their teammates are capable of. They work together, they train together, they work and think as a team. On the other hand, the lower football teams, these may be just people who turn up on a Saturday, not having seen their teammates all week, and they just kick a ball about. So teamwork is much more than being in a team. It's about knowing and understanding and respecting the respective colleagues that you're working with. So the way that healthcare professionals have been developed, have been educated, is not conducive to the multidisciplinary integrative care teams that we have been talking about in this last week. Not only that, but when professionals qualify, they go to work in a hospital or in community organizations, and there they find the same sort of silo effect. Doctors work within a team of doctors. Nurses are responsible to nursing managers. Physiotherapists work in a department of physiotherapy. So this idea of isolationism continues into professional life. So we have teams of individuals, but they're not necessarily teams that work together. So what we have to do, of course, is to rethink our way of working. Now, during the module, we've been looking at issues such as resources and processes. Resources are what is needed to do a job. So in the care of patients with dementia, we need people who are specialised in dementia care, but they need also their initial qualifications. They need to have their medical, their nursing qualifications, whatever. And they need to add to that their specialist knowledge of managing people with dementia. So you can have all the human resources, and you can also have all the material resources that are required. For example, patient-friendly nursing homes or patient-friendly wards, where there are handrails for infirm people to hold on to, whatever facilities people need. Now you can have all of these be human and material resources, but unless people actually use those resources properly and effectively, they're bound to fail, because process or the methods of working are just as important as the resources that we have to work with. And if we don't use the resources properly, then we're not going to be effective workers. So what we need to focus on then is getting out of the professional box mentality, get people out of their boxes and start talking to each other and learning about the roles and capabilities of each other. So this isolationism is a feature, and it's the byproduct really of an educational system which seemed to fit the bill, but in this day and age perhaps is not so effective. In the 1960s, in the United Kingdom at least, there was a realization of a need for collaboration between staff, and it was during this time that Dr. Cicely Saunders set up her hospice movement, because she realized that people who were dying with terminal illnesses didn't just need prescriptions. They needed nursing care, they needed social care, they needed spiritual care, their families needed care. So she set about developing the hospice movement, which was quite different from the traditional hospital ward. So this is one of the first examples, perhaps, of integrating care. But the move towards integration of care has not been an easy one, because, and as so many of you in fact have pointed out in the discussion forums, there are egos at play. There are certain people, professionals, who believe that perhaps they are the most important people, that they should lead the team, they should direct the team. And wherever you have that kind of approach, perhaps integrative care isn't going to be very effective, because a very assertive person, somebody who believes that their position, their role is more important than somebody else's, may well disinhibit other people, may well put people off from contributing in discussions. So some of the important factors about team working and developing an effective interprofessional team are that we need leadership which ensures that there is due respect shown to every member of the team. So maybe you could think about the teams that you belong to. Do you belong to a multidisciplinary team where, as I described earlier, the team members don't really integrate very well? Or do you belong to a team where there's a lot of communication, a lot of respect? So you might want to think about that. If you work in a team which does not, let's say, work well as an integrated team, maybe you could do something about it. There are many people taking this course at the moment, and it's quite clear that a lot of you are practitioners. I don't know at what level. There may be some managers, there may be people at ward level, at community level, but it doesn't really matter, because leadership goes all the way down the chain. So senior managers can be leaders. There was a question or a post on the discussion forum earlier this week, which referred to the lack of communication between a hospital and the community nursing service. Now, I would suggest in that situation, the heads of departments need to talk to each other. That is, the head of community nursing needs to talk to the head of nursing. So at that level, that sort of communication is needed. But come back to a very basic level. If you are working in a ward and you're not entirely happy with the level or the quality of integration that's going on, maybe you could take the initiative. Perhaps you could actually put a feather in your own cap, if you like, by taking the initiative here and saying, well, let's do something about this. If you identify a situation which is not ideal, then don't wait for somebody else to fix it. Maybe try to fix it yourself. Now, nobody would argue that the most important outcome should be improved quality of patient care. So that is one of your driving forces. If you were to say, look, guys, I think we could do things better because, and if you could give instances maybe of where care has not been as effective as it could have been, then we need to start talking about it. By the way, there's some research that was shown that the biggest single cause of adverse effects on patient care in the United States was down to lack of communication between professionals. So it's very important that professionals talk to each other. So if that's not happening in your ward to the extent that you'd like, or whichever area you're working in, I shouldn't just fix it to hospitals, but you could do something about it. First of all, analyze the situation. What is the problem? What do you perceive to be the problem? And can you see a solution? Now, it may be that, no, you can't see a solution, and that's not surprising, because sometimes the best solutions are the ones that are created by all of the people who are involved with the problem. So talk to colleagues, talk to the doctors, talk to the physiotherapists, whichever relevant professional you're dealing with, to see what you might do about it. Let me give you an example from my own experience. Some years ago, I was a charge nurse in a medical ward. When I came to the ward as a new member of staff, one of the things I realized was that the management of stroke patients was, well, it left a lot to be desired. We did, I think the nursing care of the patients was good, no doubt about that. But when it came to discharge, the routine then was, when the doctor said a patient could be discharged, let's say Mr. So-and-so can go home tomorrow, the ward staff will get in touch with the social work department and ask for a social work report, a home care report, and then hopefully get the patient home. Now, this inevitably caused great problems, because the social workers, if they found that the home circumstances were not good, they'd have to do a lot of work to make sure that the situation was improved, and this took time. So I spoke to the social workers and said, well, look, how much time do you need to fix problems? And they said, sometimes it takes weeks. So the answer was easy. As soon as a patient was admitted with a stroke, a severe stroke, and as soon as it was clear the patient wouldn't die from that illness, then we informed the social workers. And it was simple. It was just a case of communicating effectively at the right time. The nursing staff didn't know what the physiotherapists were doing, because the patients would go down to the physiotherapy department. So physiotherapy in those days was working 9 till 5. What happens after 5 o'clock? What happens at the weekend? The patients didn't get any physiotherapy. So I arranged for the nursing staff to see what happened, to get some tuition on appropriate physiotherapy, so that nurses could carry out the physiotherapy at the bedside during the weekends and in the evenings. So the point I'm making here is, if we identify a problem, then we need to think, well, how can we fix it? Not just let's hope somebody fixes it, but what can I do about fixing this? And it does involve talking to colleagues, asking their perceptions. What do you see as an issue? And maybe they will see things which you haven't seen. Maybe they can see solutions which you haven't seen. Now, a number of people have pointed out in the discussion forum that it's not always possible to get everybody together at the same time. And that's certainly, time is certainly a constraint in a very busy health service. But you don't have to get everybody together at the same time. If you see that as a problem, forget it. It isn't necessarily a problem. Let me show you an example on this module, on this course. We have a discussion forum. People are posting comments all the time. We don't wait for everybody to go online before we start the discussion. The discussions are happening, and people are reading comments that were posted yesterday or last week, and they're responding to them. So maybe you don't have to have a physical meeting. Perhaps we can have, or you can organize discussions, possibly online if your IT systems allow for that. But if not, then maybe you could be the coordinator, and maybe you could keep a record, a journal for the discussions, so that when, say, a physiotherapist has seen a patient, they make notes. Obviously they make notes in a record, but one of the issues that we've come across was that not everybody reads everybody else's notes. So maybe there needs to be some common focus where everybody can read notes, everybody can contribute to the same notes. But by talking to colleagues, finding out what the issues are, then you'll be able to begin to develop a process of action, a plan of improving integrative working. Because if you found out it's not working well, and you've come across some problems, and your other professional colleagues have identified issues as well, then right away you have a clearly defined problem or set of problems. It's only when you have those problems that you can start doing something about it. So then you can ask for suggestions. What do you think we ought to be doing about this? These are my suggestions. What do you think about my suggestions? So perhaps we can have debates, discussions, but not necessarily all at the same time, as long as somebody is controlling the discussion and sharing the information. But in an ideal situation, there would be discussions where everybody is together. And if that is the case, if you can bring everyone together, remember that time is at a premium. So meetings need to be short, focused, and to the point. Everybody needs to have the opportunity to speak, and the meetings, the points from the meetings should be recorded. So by taking this approach, you can begin to integrate teamwork much more effectively, even if what you previously have is a disjointed multidisciplinary team. One of the problems, and we referred to it earlier, and some people have certainly discussed it in the discussion forum, is that of egos, the members of staff who think that they have the most important voice, that they should lead the discussions. And as I mentioned earlier, this can have a disinhibiting effect. This can prevent effective dialogue, especially if somebody is perhaps a little more timid and they have good ideas, but be a little bit afraid to speak out on those ideas. So it's very important that colleagues within the multidisciplinary team should show respect to others, respect their right to state an opinion, and respect their abilities, and therefore they must know what the other person is capable of doing. And it may be that it might be appropriate to have a quiet word with the, let's say, the dominant people in a group, and say, look, you know, you've got some really good ideas, and I like the way that you're approaching this issue with conviction and with commitment. But I wonder if you might consider just letting other people have a say. So you're being polite and diplomatic about it. You're not saying, look, you're being too bossy, you're a bully. That's not going to work. But if you politely to say, you've got some great ideas, but maybe we could listen to other people's ideas as well. That might work. So by improving communication, we should improve the quality of the care that we actually provide. But this isn't so easy, because we're talking about changing individuals' behaviours, and it's much more difficult to change behaviour than it is to train somebody to do a job. So that's why good and firm leadership is important. What teams need to do is to be prepared to receive and give constructive feedback to each other. We need to deal, the managers, the leaders need to deal with inappropriate behaviours such as bullying or over-assertiveness. It's not impossible, but it needs to be managed, and it needs to be managed well and firmly. So how do you go about this? Well, the process I've described is what is known as action-centered learning. If you identify a problem, you develop an action set. I beg your pardon, action set learning. An action set is a group of people who meet to discuss a particular problem and to resolve that problem. And when the problem has been resolved, the group disbands. So that's why it's important to be very clearly focused. So if you've identified that there is a need to improve care for your patients in a particular way, then you state it, you say what you believe ought to happen, you get people together to have the discussion and hear everybody's views, come to conclusions, decide what common approach you're going to take, and then everybody has contributed to the discussion and to the solutions. And don't forget, it's not just about healthcare and social care professionals. If the patient is able to contribute, they should do so. If the patient's relatives or carers wish to contribute, they should do so, because they're the ones who are living with the problem. And because we've got a solution to a particular problem with a particular patient, doesn't mean to say that solution can apply to everybody. Some years ago, I read a textbook, which many years ago, and I forget the name of it now, but a very important point came out, and I've never forgotten this. It's about individualization. That is to say, we're not talking about patients with dementia We are talking about this patient with dementia. And this patient with dementia will have needs and wants which may be different from that patient with dementia. So although there is some common ground, we can't assume that everybody has the same needs. Everybody will have the same solution, because one solution doesn't necessarily fit. And this is why we need to talk to the patients, we need to talk to the relatives and carers. So basically what I've been suggesting here is that, and to summarize, integrated care doesn't happen because we have a lot of people on a team with different qualities, qualifications and skills. Integrated care happens when those people talk to each other, when they work together to resolve particular problems. This may require managing. Management of change is a very, very important and often overlooked process, but we discussed it. What I've been talking about is identifying the problem, finding out what the driving forces are, what, for example, improved patient care is a very strong driving force, but also thinking, what are the restraining forces? Who's going to be against this? Who's going to oppose this? And what can we do? So if you think in advance about what the opposition might be, then you can work out, or possibly work out, solutions. If you can't work out the solutions yourself, you have a team to discuss it with. Who's on your side? Discuss it with that person. So having identified the problem, the driving forces, the restraining forces, then you can set about making change, bringing about change. And once that change has occurred, it needs to be reinforced by encouragement. If you've made a change and it brings about improvement in patient care, then tell all the team, yeah, Mr. So-and-so's relatives are very pleased with the way things are going. You know, whatever positive things you can say, don't just assume that because things are going well, everybody knows that it's okay. Everybody likes a pat on the back, and that reinforces behaviour. And as I said earlier, making behavioural changes is one of the most difficult things. So if you can reinforce behaviour by giving some positive reinforcement, then so much the better. So there we have it. That is the summary of today's or this week's discussion. And but there are one or two questions which have been posed, and I'd just like to address those now. And Marina very kindly, questions that she posed last week could be transferred to this week. So yeah, let me have a look at Marina's questions. Two in particular. She asked, what would you require if there is comorbidity with dementia and another disorder as well? So we're talking about more than one physical mental condition, e.g. mania, especially when a psychiatrist does not work in an institution. Would you advise the family of the patient to visit a psychiatrist as well? Because some are against psychiatry, unfortunately. Well, that particular problem, maybe again there isn't one simple answer, but what came to me as I was thinking about this, Marina, was that each condition needs to be treated. So if a person has one or two or more conditions, whether they be physical or mental conditions, then they need to be addressed. So yeah, quite clearly they've got to. The issue about families being against psychiatry, I think that is one where you might need to discuss with the family, because maybe it's to do with the stigma of psychiatry, the stigma of mental illness. No, we don't want our father or mother to be seen by a psychiatrist. Well, maybe we need to discuss what psychiatry can actually do to help people. And bearing in mind that none of us are 100% mentally healthy all of the time. It's just that sometimes some people get into or find themselves in a situation where they actually need help, just as you need professional help if you have a physical illness. If I have a cold, I don't go to the doctor, but if I have pneumonia, I would go to the doctor. So maybe a discussion about the relatives' feelings and thoughts about psychiatry might be appropriate. Another question that Marina's posed is, in case social workers do not have enough or no education at all on dementia, how would you try to collaborate with them? Well, clearly there would be a patient issue or a set of issues which the whole team needs to address. So bringing the social workers into the integrated team is a very, very important thing to do. How much do social workers know about physiology and about cerebral anatomy? Maybe some, maybe not. But this is where I like the idea of what we call work-based learning. Work-based learning is where it's a form of experiential learning, where if you're working in a situation, you think, suddenly realize, oh, actually, I don't know as much about that as I ought to. Then you have just diagnosed a learning need. You need to find out about it. So work-based learning it's nothing magic. It's not a very technical thing. It's simply a way of saying, okay, I've identified that I don't know something, I need to find out about it. So if social workers identify for themselves the need to learn about dementia and causes of dementia, then they need to address that. You can't always tell people, you can't always tell somebody else that you need to learn this, because that would be quite aggressive and intimidating maybe. But if you say, is there anything I can help you with about understanding dementia and understanding the brain changes in dementia, maybe that's a more appropriate way of doing it. So if people are motivated to learn, if people realize that it's important for them, they're motivated, they are far more likely to learn than if they're being told they must learn it. So I hope that's answered your questions, Marina. There'll be many, many other very thoughtful posts, lots of lovely posts we've had this week, and again, I thank you all very much for those. Next week, we'll be looking at end-of-life care, and this will be the final module. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much.